And grab your seats. We're going to get started. Hope everyone's doing well. Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. Probably didn't eat the last 2 days because you ate so much on Thursday. But yeah, I think it's one of the most, it's a very biblical holiday because Scripture says that we're to in everything give thanks. And God has blessed us so immeasurably in Christ and our spiritual blessings, but also just practically. When you look around the world and look at us, and we are just, God's blessed us so wonderfully. Psalm 16, verse 6, it says, the lines have fallen to me in pleasant places. And I think that's so true for each of us, is how God has blessed us. And so I think it's great to have a holiday where we reflect on that. Well, we're continuing on in our Bible geography class. And as you know, what I'm trying to do in this section, we're just going through the major regions of Israel. I know this is kind of like getting a drink out of a fire hydrant, but I'm just trying to kind of reorient you to kind of what does it look like. And so we're going through, starting in the coastal plain, and then we're going to the lowlands, the Shephelah. Actually, while we're doing that, the Shephelah, or lowlands, and we're going to look at the hill country, and then we're going to go to the Jordan Rift, and then the Transjordan Plateau. We're going to go kind of north to south in each one of those. I'm just trying to reorient you, so when you read something, like we're going to talk about the Dothan. You know, Joseph was wandering around Dothan, right? He's trying to find his brothers, and that's right near Shechem. Really? Yeah, actually that happened right near Shechem, near Samaria. I want you to kind of be able to visualize it better. I know this is kind of like you're just being overwhelmed with pictures and slides, but I trust it's kind of reorienting. I'm trying to reformat your hard drive as far as the scriptures and the biblical geography and what it's like and what it looks like. And so, this is not an overview of the Bible about geography. We're going to do that. When we finish Bible geography class, it's probably going to be after the first of the year. We're then going to begin to go through the Old Testament. We're going to do an Old Testament panorama. And that will actually go through the different sections, section by section, where it is and what it is, with somewhat of a geography emphasis. Now I'm just trying to give you some snapshots so that I don't just say, Samaria, or I don't just say Cana, but you're like, okay, what happened in Cana? Oh yeah, that's right. That's where Christ did his first miracle. He turned the water into wine. So you can kind of connect the biblical story with the place, and it'll help you remember it a little better. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing in this. And so then when we go through the scriptures in order, it'll give you a better idea on that. So I'm just trying to give you an orientation, and we're going from north to south. We've covered all the way to most of the lowlands. We're going to look at the final couple valleys on the lowlands that go through the lowlands of the Shephelah. We're going to look at the valley of Elah and what happened there. See, I woke up thinking about the valley of Elah today. We're going to talk about what happened in the valley of Elah. Then we're going to go through those different valleys. Then we're going to go back up to the top and start looking at the highlands, the highlands of Galilee. What was it like up there? And then we'll work our way down south through the central Samaria highlands, and then through the Judean highlands. And we'll see how far we get on that. Okay? So that's just to give you an idea of what we're doing and why we are doing it in that way. And if you get stuck and you say, I don't know what we're talking about, where are we in the map? Okay? Where are we in the Bible? Just raise your hand and say, I don't know where we are, or what happened here. That will be totally fine. Or if there's a particular Bible story that I refer to something and say, did that happen there? Bring that up. I love to dialogue about that. Okay? Well, let me open us up in a word of prayer. And we'll get started. God, thank you we can be here together again. And as we look at your word, and we're looking at the geography of your word, because we know your scriptures are true, they're real. The scriptures don't claim to be a geographical textbook, but whatever it says that includes Bible geography is true. And there's specifics there because you inspired your truth and just recorded biblical history. And I pray for each person here as we are becoming reoriented to what happened where, and that it would really affect our understanding of your scriptures. And it would give us all the more a delight, all the more a joy and a thankfulness for your word. We trust you for that, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, you have this map. If you don't have it, there's extra ones in the back. This is what we're going through, okay? I just mentioned to you, we talked about the coastal plain. That's the way, this area right here, the kind of the green, whatever. We talked about, that's about, 5 to 7 miles broad. And then we talked about the Shephelah, or the lowlands, the little yellow area. It's just a transition land. We're going to finishing that up right now. And you can see, here's the coastal plain. This is kind of a kind of cockeyed. North is kind of to your left top. And we've been talking about the Shephelah, the lowlands, or these low valleys, hills, and then there's some specific 4 valleys that go through this area, and there's so much biblical history that happens in these valleys. That's why I'm spending a little time on these particular valleys. There's just a ton of biblical history that's going to happen in these valleys. The Valley of the Ajalon, right here, the Valley of the Ajalon, the Valley of the Sorek, the Valley of the Elah. We're going to look at that in a moment. And then the Lachish Valley, which is named after the main city that controlled it. Okay, and I mentioned Ajalon, the Sorek, the Elah Valley. Here's just that other map that I was mentioned to you. Ajalon, Sorek, Elah. Remember, each one of those was guarded by a particular city. And so when you read a Bible story that happens in Lachish, or you read a Bible story that happens in Azekah, or you read a Bible story that happens in Gezer, major significance, because that's like that's the city that's guarding that whole valley, that controls it. That's why it's very important what's going to happen in those areas. Okay, so we're talking about the Elah Valley back here. This is the valley we're on. That's where we left off last week. I don't write in your notes. You don't need to take notes because I'm just talking. I'm just showing you pictures, okay? So you don't need to take notes. This won't be on the test. This is just to help you in your understanding. So we're talking right now here about the Elah Valley. It's really the broadest valley. It's really broad. It's really wide. It's like a highway. It's the highway. If you want to get up to the Judean hill country, if you want to ultimately get up to Bethlehem, you want Jerusalem's up here, you climb up here, and it's very natural. It's an army could come up there. That's why when we're going to look at the Philistine battle there, it's very, very significant. Okay. Let's look at some of the things that happened there in the Elah Valley. Okay, here's the Elah Valley. You say, here's the valley. The valley kind of like an S right here. It comes right down through here. We're looking kind of from the south, but the Mediterranean's going to be over here on your left, and the Jerusalem's going to be kind of back here back behind us. Okay, but you can see, you could take a whole army through this valley. It's massive. I mean, it was very, 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 very significant. Now we're going to talk about what's the significance of that valley. Well, here's what happens there. 1 Samuel 17 in your Bible. Now the Philistines gathered their armies for battle, and they were gathered at Soko, which belongs to Judah. Judah was controlled at that time. They camped between Soko and Azekah in Ephes Dammim. Okay, now I'm going to get your perspective on that. This is what story are we talking about here? What is this story? It's in every Bible story. But it's the most famous kids' Bible story in the Bible. It's the story of what? David and Goliath. Okay, this is the story of David and Goliath. So I'm going to give you some geographical background to the significance of that city. So it's said in 1 Samuel 17, the Philistines are gathered together at Soko. See this right here? I've told you before, this is a tel, T-E-L, which means where Soko, it's where an ancient city was. And it was destroyed, rebuilt, so many times that it built up. But the Philistines are probably camped right here on this location. We don't know exactly, but pretty much the Philistines, we know almost certainly they were camped in this area. Gath, remember, we're looking east, okay? Gath is, who's from Gath? Goliath from Gath, okay? So, this is really close to his hometown. Yep, very close. You can walk there very easily. Okay, and then if you look in the distance, you get the Mediterranean is back here. We're in the Shephelah, okay? Remember we talked about we're in the Shephelah. The coastal plain is along here. Here's the Elah Valley, so the Philistines are gathered here. That's where their camp is here. And the Israelites, probably in this area, specifically the Bible uses the term Ephes Dammim, which is a particular town. We know exactly where that is. Many believe it's in this area. It could have been further back, but it was somewhere in this area. The key issue is Elah Valley separates the two forces. And that's the key issue. Just kind of give you another different picture of that. Soko, the Philistines are going to be on this side. Probably the Israelites are on this side. But here's the Elah Valley. Okay, it shows you the significance of that. And the battle Bible's, we don't know exactly where, but I've been down there's this wadi. It's a little creek that goes right down there. And it says specifically in the text, David goes down, he gathers 5 stones from the creek. That would have been in the Elah Valley. He gets the 5 stones, and then he runs. So we're not going to tell you the whole story, because you know the story, but I just want to give you the background. And then he runs, and he defeats Goliath through God's sovereign power, and God uses his skill in that as well. But the whole point of this is to show you the geographical significance of that. So the Israelites are on this side, Philistines are on this side, and there's this massive valley here, okay? What's the significance of the Elah Valley here? Why is this such a big fight? Why is this so important, that the Israelites are able to hold off the Philistines at this point?
Easy access to Jerusalem.
Okay, it's easy. It's like a freeway up to Jerusalem, okay? They don't yet have Jerusalem yet, right? Because, remember, David's not the king, and so it's not until David's the king and Joab takes Jerusalem, and yet still the Israelites, where was David from? City of? Bethlehem, okay? David's from Bethlehem. Here's Bethlehem right here. Here's Jerusalem. This is the central ridge route right along in here. This is the Elah Valley, and as Dick mentioned, here's where the battle's taking place. If they lose this is the front door to get right into Israel, and they're going to totally dominate. The Philistines, if the Israelites lose this battle, Saul loses this battle, the Philistines are right up in the very, very central part of Israel. Yeah, Dan.
So how did they communicate? Now, in my thinking, I'm thinking
they didn't text.
All Valley, and when when they're communicating with each other, the Israelites knew that Saul was there and he had said these things. And so how did they communicate with that? I mean, it's a big, big valley.
Okay, how do they communicate with the Philistines, or how do they communicate with each other?
With the Philistines.
Okay, how do they communicate? Question?
The Philistines, saying all these things bad about God. How did they do that? And Israelites heard.
Okay, how do they communicate? Now, there's 2 questions to that. How do they communicate within themselves? And one of the key issues you'll see a lot is runners. They use runners. You'll see they send messages. There's men that were runners. That's one of the ways that they would send. So obviously Jesse, he sends David down to the Elah Valley with his brothers. Why? He wants to find out. So he's sending. David's going as a messenger. David is not going as a warrior. David is not going because he needs to come back, because he needs to watch, the sheep and things. So that's the one question related to that. But then how do they communicate? Well, they gathered. They just moved across. It specifically says that Goliath would shout his taunts, and so they would, all the forces, they would come down to the valley. They come down to the valley. Well, it's like the Super Bowl game. Everyone's gathered there, and and they're on the side so they can hear. They're yelling. They're not like we think of a battle like I'm reading a story in World War II, not a story, a history of World War II when we went into the Mediterranean and our whole North Africa campaign. Well, there's ships that are shooting 10 miles, right? I mean, they're 10 miles out to sea, and they're launching against, the French were at that Vichy French were in control of Morocco and at that time, so they're 10 miles away. That's not what this was, okay? You are right there. I mean, you are very, very close. This is hand-to-hand, mano-a-mano combat when they're going to war, but they're also very, 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 very close to each other. So they could, in the valley, they could have hurt each other. I mean, very easily, going back to the valley. Well, yeah, I mean, this is relatively close. So the Israelites, Goliath comes out, he's standing here, he yells as loud as he can. All the Israelites are here, they can hear it. This is not that far away. This is not that far. Look at the width of this highway, okay? Typical highway. That's not very far, okay? It's just not very far. It's very close. Things are happening very, very close to each other. So they could easily have heard each other very, very easily. Okay, so that's what happens right there on the Elah River Valley. But my whole point of sharing that is, as Dick has mentioned, you've got to control these valleys. You have to. You mess this valley, and they're right up in your back door. Okay. What else do the lowlands includes? Okay, that's the Elah Valley. That's the Elah River Valley. Any questions on that? What happens there? I was working my way south in the valley. Let's go to the ascent to Hebron, sometimes called the Lachish Valley. It's this final one down here in the south. We're basically going to run out of the Shephelah, the lowlands down in here, and this is the kind of the southern entrance. If you went up through this valley, then you'd come up on the south, and you'd come up from the very south, come along the central ridge route. And this is guarded by the city of Lachish, which is a very, very famous city, a very famous tell. Lots of archaeological excavations have been done in this location. This is Lachish. It's like you're kind of up on here's the map here to show where you are. Lachish is down in here. It'd be kind of like you're standing on the central the southern part of the Judean highlands right here, and you're looking to the east. And so this is Lachish. Lachish is a very famous, in Joshua 10, it says that the Lord gave Lachish into the hands of Israel, the hands of Joshua. He captured it. It says he killed every single person in Lachish. He killed everyone. Why? Why did he kill everyone in Lachish? What did God tell them to do? They're supposed to kill all the Canaanites. Because if they don't kill all the Canaanites, what's going to happen? They're going to take their idols, they're going to intermarry, and so Joshua does that. 2 Chronicles 32. Now we fast forward. Joshua conquers it. The land is divided. We have the times of the judges. Then we go into the times of the kings. But then you get all the way down to like 7th century BC, 610, 605, and Sennacherib is coming through there. And this is where the whole situation of Hezekiah, Brent preached on it during this past summer, where Hezekiah is going to conquer all of that area. I mean, Hezekiah's the king, and Sennacherib is coming through, and he wants to conquer Jerusalem. Well, one of the key places he has to conquer is Lachish, and so this is one of the places that he conquers. A very, very large army. Isaiah 6:36-2 says that Rabshakeh is sent from Lachish to Jerusalem to say, you're next. I've conquered Lachish, you're next. Here's Joshua 10, the Lord gave Lachish into the hands of Israel. 2 Chronicles 32. After this, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, sent his forces to Jerusalem. While he's besieging Lachish with his forces against Hezekiah, king of Judah. So he's conquered Lachish. He says, if Lachish has been conquered, then you don't have a chance. Isaiah 36, same exact story. King of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem. So that's what happened. So here's a picture of Lachish. Another tell. You can see it's built up. There's a very famous letter that describes how the writer is a Jewish person who's looking for the signifiers of Lachish, because the signifiers of Azekah, related to communication, they would have on the top of these hills, they would build signifiers to say, we haven't lost yet. Well, Azekah, which is the valley to the north. Remember I talked to you about how Azekah is the valley to the north, along Elah Valley. It's been conquered, and their fire goes out. And now they're saying they still see the fire of Lachish. So Lachish hasn't been conquered yet, but it's about to be conquered. But God in his sovereignty does not allow Sennacherib to conquer Jerusalem. Hezekiah turns to the Lord. He humbles himself. You see that in the book of Isaiah. He humbles himself. He prays. And in one night, the angel of the Lord comes and kills 185,000 Syrians. It says they woke up and they're all dead. Well, they didn't wake up. They're all dead. And so he goes back. He ends up dying. He ends up getting killed in his own hometown. But this is Lachish, which Sennacherib had conquered very, very clearly. Okay? So that's just a background. So we were down here in this southern area. So we've seen the coastal plains, the lowlands, the hill country. This map. Okay, keep going. So continue talking about the. Okay, now we're going to go to the transition down from the lowlands. So we finished the Shephelah. I talked all about this. We just talked through these 4 valleys here. Okay, these 4 valleys here. There's the Shephelah lowlands. Now I'm going to talk about the hill country. The hill country. That's this area right here. But also there's some hill country up in here in Galilee. Okay, up in the Galilean area. It's a ridge of hills that rises real sharply in the north, but then it rises from the Shephelah more gradually here as you go further south. Okay, so I'm just going to tell you, ridge of hills rise sharply from the coastal plains, from the Shephelah in the south. The hills tend to be steep, with deeper V-shaped valleys, which means that narrow ridges must be followed for north-south travel. I want you to picture this, because generally when you think of Israel, you're going to think of what? Desert. Many times people just think kind of dry, kind of wasteland. You're going to kind of think of that, but this looks very different. Almost maybe there'll be some areas, near us it would look like. This is an example. I'm just going to give you two examples. Then we're going to walk down from north to south. This is the Beth Hussein Ridge. This is right in this area, kind of right in the center of the Judean highlands. We're looking at some mountains. So I just gave you a picture of it, it's very hilly. This is a central hill country, just in general. This is what you're looking down. These are the Judean hills. I'm just going to give you this just kind of a general. Now I'm going to go from north to south, okay? Highlands of the hill country generally broader to the north, which is Ephraim, narrower and less dividing to the south of Judah. Ancient times, this was much forested. Today, it's quite barren. As I mentioned before, the Jewish government and people have planted millions, truly millions of trees. The greatest reforestation in all of history, without a doubt. And so we're going to be looking. My little laser pointer here. We're going to be starting up here in the north. In case you see the upper Galilee right here, I'm going to be starting up in here and looking at those highlands or hill country. And then we'll skip the Jezreel Valley. We already looked at that, because then we'll jump down to Samaria after that. Okay, and so we'll start with Galilee. Okay, around the Sea of Galilee. There's an upper Galilee, which we'll look at first, and then we'll look at lower Galilee. Very, very fertile area. And this is the area we're looking at. If you have your Bible, or this is the area we're looking at right in here. You see this hill country? You can tell. This is the upper hill country we're going to be looking at. Okay, and this is what it looks like. This is very, very north. This is way up near Lebanon. Okay, way up near. You can see on the map up here. I have it. I can't even. Actually, it's further up north even than that. These are some old ruins. Many of these are ruins from the times of the Crusades. So they're not. These aren't biblical ruins at all. It would be much later than that. This is also, you can see the Lebanese border. We're actually looking into Lebanon up in here. You can see the border right in here. And we're way, way north, But my whole point is to show you the hills, that you can see the hills. Look at another one. Looking into Lebanon, you can just see the hills. That's why I want you to see the hills in this area. Mount Merom from the east, another example of the hill country. We're way up. We're a little more south. Right here, we're kind of northwest of the Sea of Galilee is where we're up in this area. Mount Merom is the second highest, other than Mount Hermon, in the area. This is just, you can just see the hill country. It reminds me of some areas in Southern California up in the kind of the hills. Very, very similar to that. So you can see some of these battles. This isn't all flat. This isn't desert area at all. This is what happened here. Okay, when Joshua goes into the land in 1406 BC. Okay, Joshua goes into the land with all the people. He's got 2 million people, but they have 3 campaigns. If you look at the book of Joshua, from Joshua 6 to Joshua 12, you'll have 3 different campaigns. So they go into the land. Joshua and all of the 600,000 fighting forces, they go into the land. They first have a central campaign where they wipe out all kind of the central military power in the center of the country. Then they'll go down south, and they'll have the southern campaign. I think it's like in Joshua 7. And then they have the northern campaign in like Joshua 9 through 11. And this is the northern campaign. Now, God very conveniently has all of these Canaanites, what do? They band together. They say, we better get together. So all these kings who were enemies prior to the Israelites showing up, they're totally enemies. They all had city-states in that sense. And so they gather together in 3 basic coalitions, central, south, north, to fight against Joshua. Well, it's very convenient because they were able to defeat all of these kings and kill all of the kings of all of these, because they come from all these areas, and defeat them. And in a sense, in 6 or 7 years, that's about how long the campaign that Joshua takes. It takes about 6 or 7 years to be able to defeat them all. Because God in His sovereignty, they don't have to go through in each place. They gather together, they kill all the kings. And so they've broken the back of the military might of Canaan. Now, after that, they divide up all the land. And it's a responsibility of each individual tribe then to go in and clean up, to take care of all the details. The military might's been broken, the fortified cities have been conquered, the major kings have been killed, and yet there's still lots and lots of Canaanite people in there and soldiers, and they're still in there. The individual tribes then need to go in and defeat. That's where they failed. Joshua did what he was supposed to do. He breaks the back of the military might, but where they failed was the individual tribes didn't go in, and as God called them. I know that there's a whole ethical question that we have. Well, how could that? Well, God, it's a judgment. If you look very specifically, it's a judgment of God upon these people who are extremely, extremely wicked people. And God very clearly said it's a judgment. When Saul doesn't kill the Ammonites, he gets in trouble. Why? Because God said this was an act of judgment that you're supposed to do because these people were so wicked. So I give that as a background to the story. So the kings of the north, what do? They gather together. All the kings of the north, they gathered together, and gives some details of where they were. And you can see the kings who were in the north, in the hill country. There's our key term, hill country. And here's the Canaanites, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites, the Termites, all the ites. They gather together. Here's this Jebusite. What are Jebusites? What's Jebus? Jerusalem. Okay, it's Jerusalem. This is actually Jerusalem. So they're gathering from a huge area, a massive area, all these kings, and he's going to defeat them. So they all come out, and they, at the foot of Mount Hermon, they came out, all their armies with them, as many people as the sand is on the seashore. There's lots and lots, hundreds of thousands. There's lots of them, with very many horses and chariots in here. So all these kings, having agreed to meet, came and encamped together at the waters of Merom, okay, to fight against Israel. That's where this is, okay? Mount Merom, which I just wanted to give you the location, is way up here north. Here's where they cross, right? They cross right here. It's about, 150 miles from, 130 to 150 miles from the very north to the very south. And so this is probably about 60, 70 miles. They march up into the northern campaign. But they fight against the northern, all these kings that are gathered together all these kings that are encamped together at the waters of Merom, which is where this happens, right in this particular area. Very, very north. Okay, this is where they're going to fight against him. This is also a very close, it's a similar area up in here. We're directly probably a little bit northeast of the Sea of Galilee. And you can see it's very hilly, very hilly. Oopsie. Okay. Just some pictures. This is a Crusader castle that was built in this area in 1226 AD, when the Crusaders, fought and defeated the Muslims in that area, and for a period of time had that. There are many things like that in this area. It was then the Sultan. They conquered it in 1271. So that's all over. But this, you'll see. My whole point is to see the hills. In this particular area. Here's Upper Galilee. Is what we're in this right here. Look at this, very hilly. It's not like you think flat, not at all. It's very hilly. You can think for warfare, guerrilla type warfare, this is ideal. I mean, this is it's very, very difficult to defend. Another, you can just see the rugged hills. This is a Nahal, which is a valley that goes through this area. Another valley. I'm kind of working my way south. We're still directly northwest, directly northwest of the Sea of Galilee, Nahal Dishan, from the north, very green. It's not like this. We're going to see the wilderness of Judea. This is not the wilderness of Judea. It's very green. And then a very famous geographical marker called the Arbel Cliffs, which is very close to the Sea of Galilee. If we kept going, you could see the Sea of Galilee would be right over in this particular area. But I'm just wanting you to see this. This is where the Galilean hills are going to end. This is a kind of a panorama, I guess you'd say. This is right here. Remember the Jezreel Valley is right in here. This valley is right in here, and it allows someone to go from the Jezreel Valley, the Beth Nophah Valley, to go up to the Sea of Galilee. In this was located probably the town of Cana. You've heard of the town of Cana. I'm going to look at a couple more pictures related to that. This is another Nahal, very, very rugged. Here's the lower Galilee. Here's that Arbel Cliffs that I mentioned to you. You're looking kind of northeast here. The Sea of Galilee is going to be right on the other side of these cliffs there. Tiran Valley, just another valley right in this area, kind of south of this a little bit. Oh, I thought this was fascinating. This was in this area. This is right in this area. Near Timrod. What is this? Hello, did my mic go off? Good. Okay. Now, these are actually 3 Hebrew letters. Shabbat. Okay? This is what was called a Shabbat marker, which meant that on Shabbat or Sabbath, same word, Sabbath, you were only allowed to walk a certain distance. So they had different locations along different, like if you lived in, this was from the town of Timrod, if you lived in the town of Timrod, and then you were only allowed to walk a certain distance. So you get that far, you're done. You gotta camp out. You can't go any farther. That's as far as you can go. This was discovered in 2011 on this guy's property. I thought that was interesting. This is once again looking across this Beit Tophah Valley from Sepphoris, which is very near what's called Cana, or very close to Nazareth. We're looking north. You can see Cana is right here. This is Sepphoris. Nazareth is kind of be behind us. Christ would have walked across this valley many, 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 many times, because you would have walked across this valley, then you go straight up here. You're going to go to the Sea of Galilee. To go from Nazareth and then to Cana and then to the Sea of Galilee, he would have walked across this particular valley. Now there weren't these, there wasn't this buildings or different things on it, obviously, but Christ would have walked across this many, many times. This is, I mentioned to you, Cana. Here's Cana right here. Here's Cana right here. Beth Nophah Valley, Sea of Galilee up in here. Nazareth behind us. Cana, John 2:1. On the 3rd day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee. That's where it was. And the mother of Jesus was there. Just to give you a location so you know on your map where you are. Here's Galilee right in here. So, he's in Lower Galilee. So we're right in here where Nazareth, Cana is going to be right in this particular area. This is another picture of Cana. Just want to give you pictures. When you think of Cana, you just probably think, maybe wrong. I know what you think. But it's just flat. You just go, no, it's not flat. He had to walk across the Beth Nophah Valley, and then he's going to go to Cana. It was probably in the foothills of this particular area, right in this area. That doesn't look like much to you, but just give you a little closer up, and you can tell, oh yeah, there's something there. This is probably, we're not 100% sure, but this is probably where the wedding at the Cana of Galilee occurs in this area. And it's not massive. It's not like 10,000 people live there. It was a small village called Cana, where Christ does his very first miracle. John talks about that, where Christ does his very first miracle. And this specifically, it says where the disciples believed in him because they understood, this is the Messiah. John has 7 miracles, and that's the very first one that happened. It happened in this particular area here. This is looking, this is from the west, looking to the east. Sea of Galilee is right down in here. Once again, I'm just working my way through, looking at the central highlands, okay? So the highlands of Galilee are up here to the north. Here's the Arbel and Horns of Hattim, which is another geographical feature. But the Sea of Galilee is going to be right on the other side of this, okay? So that's the hill country, okay? So we saw saw the hill country in your notes. I'm just going down to your notes on that. Hill country of Galilee, we saw that. Now we're going to work our way south, okay, to the hill country of Ephraim, or also the hill country of Samaria. In the New Testament, we call the area of Samaria. In the Old Testament, it's the tribal allotment for Ephraim, what they would have been given. It goes from the south of the Valley of Jezreel to the central Benjamin Plateau. It's not quite as steep. It's more passable, tillable, but they tend to terrace it. We'll see a lot of terracing in this particular area. So I'm working my way south, okay, right here. We're basically, you would think of Samaria. We're right down here. We were just up here in Upper Galilee. We just kind of transitioned through here. Now we're going to the hill country. We're looking at the central area of the hill country. We're looking at right in here. We're going to look at Shechem. We're looking at Samaria. Ebal is this particular area. So what does it look like in this central area? You say, oh, this is a little less rugged. Now, remember up in the north, you saw these big, just valleys. This is a little broader, easier to travel. This is within the area of Ephraim, Old Testament-wise, Samaria, New Testament-wise. Here's what do you call it? Aerial picture on the Beth Horon Ridge. Here you can see the Beth Horon. You'll see that many times talked about in Scripture. You're looking across the Jordan River. You're looking at the Transjordan Plateau, Moab over in this area, modern-day Jordan or Syria in that area. Gibeah of Saul, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Ajalon Valley. Remember I just talked to you about the Ajalon Valley? Just talked about the Ajalon Valley. Well, that's what's going to meet up here. That's the Shephelah down in here, Ajalon Valley. Now it's coming up to the hill country. So you had to travel up the valleys, but then when you got to the hill country, you had to generally they travel up the ridges. Here's another example of what the hill country, and we're kind of up in this area right in here. Ramallah, which is a modern day, you hear Ramallah in the news a lot. Transjordan over in here. Okay, just as a Beth Horon Ridge again from the south. This is where it says in Joshua 10, they fled before Israel from Beth Horon down to Azekah. The Lord hurled great hailstones. This is kind of when they run down the valley of Ajalon. Same place, same location where that occurs. Another central Benjamin Plateau, which is lots of biblical stories are going to happen in this area. We're going to talk about more of them. You can see. Here's another one, Mount Hermon, you can't see it, but it's way in the south. This is where Samuel, the prophet Samuel, this was his stomping grounds. Obviously, none of these houses were here, but this is the central Benjamin Plateau where Samuel, it specifically says in the book of 1 Samuel, that he had this route that he'd go around. And it was right in this area, exactly in this area where he would walk around, he would function as a judge. Very, very famous biblical story that happens here, and this is in the central Benjamin Plateau. Remember, we're in the central area, right? We just went from north to south. We saw Samaria, the hills there. Now we're looking at more of the central Benjamin Plateau. We're directly north of Jerusalem, and this is a very famous story happens here. We're in 1 Samuel 14. Jonathan says to his armor bearer, let us go over to the Philistine garrison. It's on the other side, but he did not tell his father. Okay, there's a pass. This is where you normally go through, the Israelite forces, the Philistine forces. Jonathan wants to cross over. Well, I think I have the verse here. Yeah, there we go. The day came that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who was carrying his armor, come and let us cross over to the Philistine garrisons on the other side. But he did not tell his father. Why? His father's cowering back at camp. And Jonathan, who's an amazing young man, obviously he gets killed in the sovereignty of God, and yet he wants to go out and fight the battle of the Lord. In 1 Samuel 14:2, Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gibeah under the pomegranate tree, which is Migron, and the people with him were about 600 men. That's not very many. And so this kind of gives you a background where he is. This is the situation where they're camped out in. Well, the story continues on. In 1 Samuel 14:5, the one crag arose on the north opposite Michmash, and the other on the south opposite Geba. So the Philistines are in Michmash, Saul and his forces are in Geba. Then Jonathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, I love this line, come, let us cross over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. In other words, they are not followers of the Lord. Perhaps the Lord will work for us. He's not presuming. He's not saying the Lord is going to. He's just saying the Lord could. The Lord could. And here's the key line. The Lord is not restrained to save by many or by few. And this is where that story happens. Okay, where they cross over. You can't see it really well, but there's a real defined area here where Saul is in Geba and the Philistines are in Michmash, and they cross over. It's a very, it's somewhere in here. I don't remember exactly where it was, but it was a very, very defined. So what is it? The geography defines what happens here. And so what happens? I love what Jonathan says. He said, here's how we'll know. He said, we'll tell them, we're down here, and if they call us to come up there, then we know God is on our side. Now that's not, to me, that's not militarily very smart. I would generally see if you have the high ground, hey, you come down here to us, and then we're on level playing. He says, no, if they tell us to come up to them, and they do. And so they say, come up to us. They go up there, two of them. Remember, there's only one sword. There's only two swords in all of Israel. Saul has one, Jonathan has one. So Saul and Jonathan, his armor bearer, they go up the hill, and they basically kill 20 the Philistines. Obviously, they kill the first guy. He gets a sword. He gives his sword to his armor bearer. So now they got two swords. And what it does, it creates a rout. And so the Philistine army, this reputation goes through that something's happening, and so the Israelites all begin to chase them, and they defeat them, all because of this situation. And it all happens at that pass. And it's a very vivid pass. It's a very clear area where it was. But it happens in this very clear geography. Okay. These are some hills on the side. I'm just continuing working my. These are the hill country of Judah. Just working my way south from there. This is Samaria. No, I'm talking about Samaria, the region. We'll look at Samaria, the city or the town, in a moment. Actually, more I want to focus on the area. This is where John chapter 4. Christ left Judea. And he went away again into Galilee. So Christ spends most of his ministry in Galilee. So he was in Judea. He's going to transition up to Galilee. And it specifically says he had to pass through Samaria. It's a very interesting phrase. The reason is because, of course, obviously, if he's down here in Judea, he wants to get up into Galilee, and there's Samaria, he has to pass through Samaria. But why is that an interesting phrase? What do we know about the background of the situation? Who lives in that central area?
Half-breeds.
Who? Half-breeds called the Samaritans. Okay, the Samaritans live in that area. The Jews, they hated them. They hated them worse than they hated the Gentiles, the full Gentiles, because they're half-breeds, half Jewish. It happens when the Assyrians in 722, when they take the northern kingdom, and then they bring back Gentiles, they all intermarry, so it becomes a whole breed of half-breeds. Samaritans, the Jewish people hated. So it says he had to go through Samaria. It says in the text, it's not a geographical statement. It's a God's sovereignty statement. Because if you were a good rabbi, you would what? You would cross over Jordan. You'd cross up all the other side because you did not want to go through Samaria because you would have been defiled. If you had even just gone through the area of Samaria, you did not go through that area. Absolutely not. But it specifically says in the text, he had to pass through Samaria. And then he does. And he goes through Samaria because in his sovereignty, he's going to tell this woman about this living water. She's going to the well. He tells her about this living water, and it says there's a great revival in this whole area of Samaria, which is absolutely amazing because they were not followers of God. This is the hills of Samaria. Samaria and Shechem are very close to each other. You see the town of Shechem very, very close to each other in that. Ben, you had a question?
Was it possible for Jesus to be unclean?
Was it possible for Jesus to be unclean? Absolutely Pharisaical law. Absolutely Pharisaical law. He could have been, right? But then there also were things specifically that, you could have been unclean based on even the Levitical law. Yeah, there were ways that it could have been. There were many practical. I'm not going to go into detail about them. If you touched a dead person, right, you were ceremonially unclean, and yet he was above the law, and so it didn't really affect him. But ceremonially, probably, yeah, according to the Levitical law, definitely. He definitely would have been. Yeah.
John, the Samaritans, did some of them practice Judaism?
Did some of the Samaritans practice Judaism? Not generally. I know we were in Samaria and we talked to his brother of the current high priest of Samaria. They currently have a high priest of Samaria, and they would consider themselves the longest lasting, I guess you'd say, monotheistic religion in that area. And they don't practice Judaism. Because remember, she tries to divert the question. She says, well, they say you're supposed to worship here, and you say you're supposed to worship here, and then he specifically says no salvation is of the Jews because they had it wrong. The Samaritans absolutely had it wrong. They were not followers of Judaism. Now, could there have been some converts? There could have been. Yeah, she definitely knows something about it. She knew something. They have forms of the biblical writings, but they're different. And then we know what happens. They all come to Christ, right? There's a massive number of Samaritans that come to Christ, and so they are much more responsive than the Jewish people down in Judea, the religious leaders who should have been much more responsive to that. Okay, Samaritan Hill Country. There's a fertile valley. Just give you a background on that. Now, as we're continuing, I'm up a little bit more north. This is still Samaria, and north in this area, and Dothan. Okay, Dothan. This is the Dothan Tel. Okay, T-E-L. Why do I show you that? Well, because there's a very famous biblical character that was wandering around this area in Dothan. Genesis 37:13. Israel. Who is Israel? Jacob, his name's been changed to Israel. Israel, or Jacob, said to Joseph, his son, are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Basically Old Testament Samaria, that's the same area. Come and I will send you to them. And he said to them, I will go. Then a man said, they find him wandering around. He's wandering around in this area of Shechem, Samaria. It's been called Samaria at the time. The man said, they have moved from here. For I've heard them say, let us go to Dothan. So Joseph went after his brothers and he found them at Dothan. Okay, so that's the area right here. This is where Joseph was wandering. This is the town of Dothan, but somewhere in this valley, his brothers had moved. They were, south of here. That's where their father Jacob or Israel was, and so they had gone up into this area to find pasture for their flocks. And so Joseph goes up there to find them. We know the whole story. What happens is they end up. They're going to kill him, but Judah, in a sense, Reuben saves his life by he has him, throws him into a pit. But and you may think, that happened way down here because you have these Egyptian traders, Ishmaelite traders way down here. No. This happens way up north. This is way north of Jerusalem, significantly north of Jerusalem. Because why? There's a highway that's going to come down through here, and so there's some traders that are going to go by, and they're going to trade Joseph, and he's going to go down into Egypt, and we know the whole story that ends up happening down there. But that happens in this area, right in just north of Samaria, very, very close to this same area where the Samaritan woman, that story happened. Okay, Rimmon area. This is the place, you remember at the end of Judges, where they have this whole inter-tribal warfare, and they basically almost completely wipe out the Benjamite tribe. 600 Benjamite men, they flee to what's called the Rock of Rimmon. It was somewhere in this area. This is the area of Rimmon. This is up a little north. They flee to this area, and they're still there 4 months later, and they have this whole goofy thing with the party, and they're going to kidnap the girls so they can have wives, otherwise they're going to go out of existence. That's what this is where that particular area happened. Hatzor, this is not the same Hatzor as Baal Hatzor. This is right here in this area. This is where Ammon, remember Ammon had that great sin, and his brother Absalom, against his sister. Absalom is very upset at him, and so Absalom has a party. He invites Ammon to it, and this is where he murders him. David's two sons, horrible things that happen within them, and they put him to death. Well, that's where it happened. So it's pretty close to Jerusalem. Jerusalem will be right in here, and so this area, Baal Hatzor, is in that area. I'm just showing the hill country, okay? Then just to see the hills. What are the hills like, okay? And we're going a little bit east here. Here's the central hills. We're going a little bit, a little east toward the Jordan Rift. So we're going to be looking right in this area, right in here. You can see it's rugged. It's not as I guess you say forested. And then as you go the hills of the eastern Samaria. We're in eastern Samaria, so we're getting close to the Jordan Rift here. Obviously, it's going down into the Jordan Rift, and so it's going to become much more desert-like. It's going to be somewhat similar to the wilderness of Judea. Another wadi, and we're in eastern Samaria, right in here in eastern Samaria, in this area. Eastern Samaritan mountains, you can see right here's the Jordan Rift. Here's the Jordan Rift. Here's Transjordan across here. I'm right here in Samaria. These are the eastern Samaritan hills. Just what they would have looked like. Okay. So that's so now let's look at the hill country of Judah. We just looked at the hill country of Samaria. Let's look at the hill country of Judah. Okay. So here's Samaria right here. I know it's kind of a lot of information, but I hope it just kind of reorients your thinking. What do these areas look like? Okay. So we just came through the Upper Galilee hill country. We came through the Samaritan hill country. Now let's look at the Judean hill country, which is where lots and lots and lots of biblical stories happen. Here's the Judean hills. This is all very close to Jerusalem, this particular area. This is near Bether. One of the things I mentioned to you in this area, they do a lot of terracing in the hill country. You can't just have big old wheat fields. Generally, there's not enough land. And so they do a lot of terracing in this particular area, where a lot of which would also determine the kind of crops you're going to have. A lot of olive trees, a lot of vines, grapevines, things like that are going to be in this particular area. Another example of that, this is the hills in the Judean hills. We're kind of in this central area, very close to Jerusalem. This as well, very close to Jerusalem. You can see the hills, you can see the vineyards in here. Another example, you have the hills, you have kind of some open areas in here, and vineyards in this area. Etam, this is one of the cities that were fortified by Rehoboam when Jeroboam takes the 10 northern tribes. This is about 2 miles southwest of Bethlehem. So Jerusalem's right about there, Bethlehem's right here, and so this is be right kind of in this area, right in here. You can see the hills. I mean, it looks very different from the northern hills. Here's this is looking east, and so you have basically Jerusalem up in here. This is the central Judean hill country right in here. We're coming up from the coastal lowlands, coming up from the Shephelah, and here there's a Kiriath Jearim ridge route where they would go up in this way. A very, very famous area. In 1948 war, this is where the newly begun Israeli state is trying to basically fight off those that are trying to attack them and destroy them. They're trying to get up to Jerusalem. Well, there are Arab snipers all along in here as they're trying to get up to Jerusalem as convoys, trying to stop convoys from going to Jerusalem. Another Jerusalem highway. This is Jerusalem's going to be up in here. We're coming up from the Shephelah, this area. This is the Chesalon Nahal. In this area, you can see the cliffs, a little more rugged in that area. This is the Nahal Sorek. We already talked about the Sorek, right? The Sorek Valley. This is further up. I showed you the Sorek Valley in the Shephelah. It's kind of broad and open. Now it's much more closed up. Remember, this is where the Delilah, Samson, that whole thing happened along further west in this valley. This is another example of the Sorek Nahal. So that we're going down, and so everything that happened with Samson will be down further here in the lowlands in the Shephelah. If you continue up this way, you're going to go up to Jerusalem, where you're going to be hitting Jerusalem. This is now looking from the west to the east. You can see beginnings of Jerusalem in this area. Ein Karim, you won't see that in your Bible, but it's commonly, many scholars believe this is probably where Elizabeth and Zechariah were from. The Bible doesn't tell us. Elizabeth and Zechariah, parents of John the Baptist, where they're from. Probably in this area. We're not sure, so it's going to be down in this area here. So when Mary comes down from Nazareth, this is where she very possibly come. We don't know exactly, but there are pretty good traditions that would indicate that's where it's from. Moza, listen to this title here. It's very possibly, very likely, this is Emmaus, or Emmaus. In Luke chapter, the end of the book of Luke, when Christ is walking with those two disciples, Christ has died, he's resurrected. They don't know he's resurrected yet, and it says they're walking to Emmaus, and that's where they say, oh, we thought that he was the Messiah, and then he dies. We think it's over. Well, it's probably in this particular area, Emmaus. I think you might have another picture. Yeah, Luke 24. Behold, two of them were going that very day to a village named Emmaus, which was about 7 miles from Jerusalem, quite close. And they were talking with each other about all these things which had taken place. And while they were talking, discussing, Jesus himself approached and began traveling with them. That's in this area, the same area near Emmaus. This is once again in the Judean hill country. You know, once again, you'll probably picture it's just flat, right? It's just flat. It's just like Israel's like all flat. It's not all flat. It's in the hill country. They're walking up and down these valleys as they're walking. And this is in the Sorek River Valley. It says upstream of the Sorek River Valley. Sorek's going to be down here, and we talked about the Sorek. This is upstream of that. Okay. A valley of Rephaim, which is a very famous valley. 2 Philistine attacks on David is going to be right in this area, right here. Oh, this has nothing to do with biblical geography. But anyway, I thought it was interesting. Dinosaur tracks. They actually found some dinosaur tracks in this area in Judean hills. You won't find that in your Bible. But there it is. Some guy in his backyard. 1962. Found this in his backyard. How would you like that? I don't know. That's interesting. Yeah, just knowing these particularly, remember we were talking about the highlands. Beth Zur, this is about 4 miles north of Hebron, about 15 miles south of Jerusalem, okay? So Jerusalem's right about there. Hebron's down in here. So this is going to be right in this particular area here. You can see the highlands. It does snow there. Not like here. It doesn't snow like it snows here, but they will get snow. Scripture talks specifically about that. What else got another example of that? Once again, what do you see? Terracing, okay? That's what you're going to see characteristically of the Judean highlands. You can see a lot of terracing in this particular area. Another example of that.
John, do they irrigate any of those, or is it just all natural?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Do they irrigate that? I doubt it. I would guess it's going to be, it's going to affect the what they actually plant there. I mean, as far as I know, if they did irrigation, there's no like water that's going to come down that they're going to channel. It'd be very limited, very, very limited if they did that. There is going to be some rainfall there. We're going to get to Hebron, which is the furthest south, and you can still basically live and have a population survive. But in this area, they did get enough rainfall. They would get enough rainfall like here. They would get very similar to here. I think about 20 inches, something like that. Very similar. Okay. This is, I mentioned this last Dibir. Joshua 10, therefore Adonijah, king of Jerusalem, sent word to Hoam, king of Hebron, to Piram, king of Jarmuth, and to Japhia, king of Lachish. You know all those guys, right? Dibir, king of Eglon, saying, what? He's gathering together. Remember I told you that they gather themselves? Here's what they're doing. Then Joshua and all Israel with him returned to Dibir, and they fought against it. This is where he's in that one of those central campaigns. He's defeating them. That's where he does this. Very close to Jerusalem. This would have been quite close to Jerusalem. Judean hills near Dibir. Again, you can see the hills. There's still some valleys in there. Okay, so the Jeshimon, wilderness of Judea. This is going to be, when you think of Israel, you'll probably think of this more. Okay, I'm sorry. This lies west and north of the Dead Sea. So it's west of the Dead Sea, north of the Dead Sea, baked by hot winds off the salty Dead Sea. It's very arid soil, naked rock throughout, deserted but not isolated. Okay, it's deserted but not isolated. Now, this isn't where you're going to have large cities going to grow up, because it's not a lot of water. But guess what? If you're trying to get away from someone, this is where you'd be. A lot of throughout history, there were people. David even is going to be into this particular. Christ is going to be in this area when he's wanting. John the Baptist is going to be in this particular area. Much later on in the Bar Kokhba revolt, when they're revolting against the Romans in like 140 A.D. This is one of the areas where they're going to go, because it was you could hide out very easily in this area. So what we're looking at here, we're looking at right in this area, right in here. Okay, I'm going a little bit east. It's this area right here. Okay, this area right in here, right in there. We just went through all this area, the highlands, the hills. Now we're going to look at the wilderness. Okay, and here's just an example: Judean wilderness west of Jericho. So basically between Jericho and Jerusalem. This would have been very much the area where, particularly Christ, when he goes, he's taken into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. This would have been this particular area. Matthew 3, and in those days John the Baptist came preaching in the wilderness of Judea. That's where this is. Repent, kingdom of heaven is at hand. And then Jesus, the next chapter. Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil, and after he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he became hungry, okay? So that's what this area would be. This would have been the area that I'm very rugged. And it's probably what you think of when you think of Israel. So there are places like this. Now, it's not all like this, but there definitely are places like this. You can see you're not going to have a large population in this area. It's difficult to survive. Now here's the spring, so you're going to get a little bit of green because get a little bit of moisture on this area. Once again, this is near Jericho, very close to Jericho from the road from Jerusalem down to Jericho. This would have been very close to that. I think, Luke 10, the story of the Good Samaritan, when the religious leader says, well, who is my neighbor? He doesn't really want to know who is my neighbor. He just wants to put off the issue like, I don't have any responsibility. And Christ tells this amazing story in the geographical setting of this story. He says, Jesus replied and said, a man was going from Jerusalem to Jericho. He fell among robbers, and they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. Well, this is where it happens. Okay, so Jerusalem, here's Jerusalem. Up here, here's Jericho. Down here, you can see this is the tell. This is the Jericho tell. Right down there. But this is the area. So basically that man was making, now it's a story, okay? It's not a real, it's a story. But it's vivid, it's real. I guarantee it happened. Things like this happen all the time. But you would have traveled, basically 2,000 feet down. You're going a long ways down. He's going down this, and somewhere along here, where it's very rugged, lots of great places to hide out, for robbers to hide out, that's where it would have happened as he was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho. Okay, here's just some sheep on Judean wilderness hills. Show this picture because Judean wilderness was sheep grazing on Christmas. Why that Christmas? Well, there are some people that say, I don't think necessarily it's December 25th, but they say, well, there's no sheep out on December 25th. No, actually there are. They do that, so you have to be careful. We don't know when the exact date when Christ was born, probably about 4 to 6 BC, but this would be an area just looking at that. Okay, further pictures, I'm going to go down through and look at some of these down through here. This is Judean's wilderness, again, very rugged, just very, very rugged. I'm just continuing going on south. Here's the Judean wilderness. I'm working my way south. Here's the Dead Sea. Very rugged. Very, very rugged in this period. This is where David, David would have hid out. When you talk about En-Gedi and David's hiding out, he's in the cave from Saul. This is the area where David is hiding out because it had caves, great places to hide. Remember it says that David is on one side of this thing and Saul's on the other side. That's what this area would have been. Very much like that. Another example, here's the Dead Sea. Here's the coast of the Dead Sea. This is that wilderness area very, very clearly. Okay? So the eastern Negev, I'm just going to go down this area right in here, just see what that looks like. Right into this area right down in here. You can see it's pretty, fairly bleak. This is Tekoa. We call it, there's a street right behind, we live in Manitou, called Tico. Well, that's not the way it's probably pronounced, but anyway, the woman of Tekoa. It's spelled exactly the same way. That's probably where they got it from. There's the south of hill country, eastern Negev, and then you go down to Hebron. I just got a couple more slides on this, and then we'll wrap it up. Here's Hebron right in this area. So we're walking down, continuing that area, down in this area of Hebron. What did it look like? Here's, I'm back into the kind of central hill country. You can see what it looks like. Here's Hebron, lots of biblical stuff. This is where the spies go through this area in Numbers 13. There's 5 kings from this area of Hebron. David, this is where David is first anointed king, is in Hebron. Hebron. For 7.5 years he's there. Absalom begins his revolt in Hebron. Lots of things happen in this area of Hebron. Okay, so here's just the vineyards and terrace hillside near Hebron. So what I've done is I went from north, to the very, 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 very top, and I went down. I showed you the hill country from all the top, and went down to the central area, and then went a little bit to the, not Jordan Rift, but just the wilderness area down through that area. Okay, well, I'm going to wrap it up there. We're going to look at the Jordan Rift next time. Any questions on that? I know it's like a lot of information. I hope it just kind of reorients you. So when you think of biblical stories, you think, what did that look like? What was it like in that area? Okay, any questions at all? Okay, yeah.
Crops would they grow besides the olive trees?
What kind of crops in the hill country? What kind of crops would they grow? Well, in the hill country, it was very limited. Very limited. I mean, obviously, Boaz is growing some grains, and yet it's limited. You had very, very small areas. It's not like the Shephelah or down into the coastal lands where you could have massive, huge fields. You could have the same kind of crops, but it's going to be very limited. And also, what's going to affect it? The water. Like Ken said, it's pretty much dry land farming. Until it's going to affect, you need to have kinds of crops that would do well with that. So they were able to figure, well, now the Jewish people today have figured they have the hydroponics, and they've just been amazing what they've done with that. But back then they didn't have that. So water was everything at this time. And they're sovereignly in a place where God has, basically, if they don't trust God, the rain doesn't come, right? That was a part of the blessing of God. And if they don't trust God, they don't get the rains and their crops don't survive. And so that was a part of it, too, as well. It's an opportunity for them to trust the Lord. Okay? Let me close our time in prayer. Father, thank you so much for these things as we look. These are real places. Real things happened in these real places. And I pray that we would live in light of the truth, God, that you are real and that you worked through each one of these people for your glory. And that we can realize that you're sovereign, in control of all things. Help us to better understand your word so we can apply it to our lives. In your name, amen.